What's happening, everybody? This is Gayuka Musa, also known as Coach G, and I'd like to welcome you to this week's episode of The Friday Fix. Now, today's episode is all about the question, why does this keep happening to me? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Why do I keep experiencing this? Why does this keep happening to me? Why is the betrayal or the infidelity or the abuse or the feeling like I'm dating the same person with a different face? Why does that keep happening to me over and over and over again? So here's the thing I want you to consider. I want you to consider the question, is this really happening to me or is this happening through me? I know you're like, okay, Coach G, what does that mean? We're going to get back to that in a second. So here's what I want to start you off with. I want to start you off with this nugget of truth. And the truth is, we teach people how to treat us. And the way that we teach people how to treat us is with our air. And you're like, okay, Coach G, what? Our air? What does that mean? So I'm not talking about the wind. I'm not talking about the air that we breathe. I'm not even talking about if you pass gas or if your breath stinks. I mean, and even though those things might affect how somebody treats you, but what I talk about are air. We teach people how to treat us with our air. I'm talking about our actions, our inactions, and our reactions. Those three things are the things that we use to teach people how to treat us. They're ultimately the choices we make and how we respond to what they bring our way and what lets them know what's acceptable or, when they've crossed a line that they shouldn't cross, when a boundary has been crossed, when something shouldn't be done the way that they just did it. So we use our air to teach people how to treat us. And there's this quote that I love that, I don't know who the original author is, but the quote goes like this. The first time something happens to you, you're a victim. The second time something happens to you, you're a volunteer. And I love the way that quote contrasts the victim and the volunteer, contrasts the passive and the active. Because when we think about a victim, when we think about, being victimized or victimization, we often can look back at our relationships and see those moments when we were kind of reliving some pain that we experienced, kind of over and over in our minds. Or we allowed something that we went through to change how we think about ourselves or change how we value ourselves. Or we spend a lot of time, asking why did they do that? Or how could they treat me that way? And the truth is, when you choose to respond to some incident in that manner, in addition to feeling the hurt and the pain and the injury from that incident, you're also kind of compounding it because ultimately you're taking it a lot farther than the original infraction would allow for. You're repeating it in your mind over and over, and you're causing so much more injury. You're victimizing yourself and injuring yourself in that process. And if you think about volunteering, on the other hand, volunteering is a very active and creative way of being. And the truth is, that victimization we just talked about, that's actually a form of volunteering. But what we're going to talk about in this video today is a way to volunteer in a way that further supports who you are as a person and starts to create the types of relationships that really will thrill you and things that you really want for yourselves. So this is what I want you to do for today's fix. Today, I want you to walk to the beat of a different drummer. And the way that I want you to do that is to ask yourself the question, am I playing the victim? Because again, you're really the volunteer. And if you're playing the victim, you're just pretending. That's not really who you are. And that's actually not even really what you're doing, even in those moments where you're playing that victimization role or you're injuring yourself over and over. You're not actually being the victim. You're actually volunteering just in a victim-like way. And so I want you to stop pretending to be the victim. You may have heard this saying about relationships. The saying goes like this. The thing that all of your relationships have in common is you. I'm sure you've heard that before. And I think that's a very true statement, and I like to think about it in a slightly different way. The thing that I think all of your relationships have in common are your patterns. And your patterns are ultimately uh, your air, your actions, your inactions, your reactions, especially those that are kind of automated. Because automation is it's kind of a key to our existence. Our brains don't just think about every single thing that they have to do. They start to lock some things away in memory and put those things on repeat. So think about this. Your brain doesn't actually think about how to drive a car anymore. I mean, once you learn that, you don't actually have to tell yourself or remind yourself to, take your right foot and put it on the brake and then apply pressure when you want to stop the car. And then when you're ready to go again, move it over to the right and press on the gas, but not too fast. Do it kind of slow so you don't just, dive forward, ease into it. You don't have to have those conversations with yourself because you know how to drive now. And so you're able to exercise these automated actions in a way that allows you to move throughout your day and do different things in life. And so there's nothing wrong with having these automated responses, but what we're going to do in this week's fix is try to evaluate some of the automated versions of your air, your automated actions, inactions, and reactions to see if they really serve you in getting the type of relationship that you want. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to write down that thing that keeps happening to you. And maybe it's a few things, but whatever it is, I want you to write down this thing that prompts the question, why does this keep happening to me? And then what I want you to do is I want you to list out all of the automated errors, all of those automated actions, inactions, and reactions that you might have surrounding that thing that's happening to you. So when you're thinking about those reactions, I want you to think about some of the subtle things, like maybe a gut response that you ignored. You're in a situation and something just doesn't feel quite right. Maybe it's when you first start dating someone or whatever it is. It doesn't quite feel right, but you kind of ignore that gut response that's telling you, something to pay attention to, something to dig into here. Or maybe it's a red flag that kind of presents itself, but for some reason you decide that flag isn't red. Maybe it's kind of orange, kind of a burnt orange, but it's not a red flag. And so you talk yourself out of seeing what you actually know that you see. And so when you start to analyze these different automated responses, these different automated actions, inactions, and reactions, you can really start to see which ones might be serving you and which ones you might want to replace with something else. Because ultimately, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take charge of your choices. You are the volunteer. You're not the victim. Take charge of those choices and realize that those choices ultimately can lead you to new cycles, that when you can attract different people, when you can attract different situations, you can start to experience some different cycles. And when you have those different people and those different experiences, you may find yourself instead saying, I'm so glad this keeps happening to me. Wouldn't that be something? Until next time, this is Coach G reminding you to free your mind so your life will follow. Take care of each other, all right?